Hi, loves, and welcome to the With Love Always podcast, a podcast to help you live the life you were created for. We are your hosts and your friends, Bree
and Marissa,
and we're so grateful you're here.
We pray you listen and leave feeling more inspired, encouraged, and uplifted.
We are going to dive right on into the topic of comparison. And the reason why I just felt so led to start off our podcast really diving into this topic is because I know for me, as someone in my 20s, a woman, so many different things, this is something I've found myself struggling with. And if I'm struggling with this and am overcoming it, I have a feeling that I am not alone in this. And so it's something that we wanted to just jump right on in and share some encouragement over and share the lessons that we've learned in our own struggles with comparison and just kind of speak very vulnerably and honestly about this topic. So it just had us both thinking as we were kind of prepping for this episode is there's something really funny about being in your 20s and the way that comparison can sting so deep. Because when you think about it, up to this point in your life, everything in your life is pretty similar. When you are in elementary school, or elementary school is really early, but when you're in middle school or high school, everyone's path is like relatively the same. When you're in college, we're all doing the college thing. We're freshmen, we're sophomore, so on and so forth. And you start seeing some things being a little different. Like maybe you see your friends entering relationships, getting serious with someone. Maybe you see your friends like talking about their dream job after college. But for the most part, we're all kind of, in the same season of life. But then I think something really funny happens right when we kind of graduate college and enter our 20s, early 20s, mid 20s, late 20s, and even beyond that, is that we start seeing the immense differences in everyone's timeline. For example, between Marissa and I, she is married and she has been married for 3 years, right?
Yeah.
3 years. And I am a little bit older by like a year or two, and I'm still so single. And that is just one of the ways that life in your 20s just gets really different. And I think that's one of the ways that that comparison can kind of start creeping in. And I think about also, some people have their dream jobs. Some people are working 9 to 5. Some people have started businesses. Like the list kind of goes on and on with that.
Yeah, that's so true. I honestly, for me, I feel like comparison is such a seasonal thing. Like, I feel like it really depends on what season, what stage of life I'm in. Where as we were prepping for this episode, I was thinking back and I'm like, oh, I don't struggle with comparison as much as I did when I was younger. And I had all of these insecurities, maybe about how I looked, that I've kind of just grown into and accept it. But I realized, oh my gosh, I actually do. I'm comparing myself constantly. That's always like a metric I'm using, unfortunately. But it just looks a little different, like you were saying, where it might be more so focused on career now or finances or somebody starting a family and you not being able to, or having your dream house and you're just not even in a place to even think about buying a home. So I think it just is constantly evolving for us. And something that I've found in comparison is, for me, it's always been such a signal of honestly what I'm idolizing. So I think I've become really attuned to it recently and leaned into the fact that, okay, I'm catching myself comparing. That's important that I actually recognize and acknowledge that so I can understand where it's coming from, because a lot of times it is an idol. If I'm comparing myself to other people about my career and where I'm at, a lot of times it's because I'm actually idolizing my career, and that's where I'm really finding my value. So I do think it's something that it's so important that you talk about it with friends. Honestly, just journal about it and process it, because I think it is such a signal for us. So I would just, don't get frustrated with yourself. It's natural, but be mindful and start seeing what are the areas I'm comparing myself in and what is kind of prompting it. Is it social media? Is it the kind of people I'm hanging around? I think just that's the first step in comparison, is just acknowledging it and kind of identifying where it's sort of coming from. And so I was curious, you just have moved to LA pretty recently. Have you found that comparison has kind of become more prominent since moving here?
Yeah, that is such a good question, because background for me, if you guys kind of got to know me in episode 1, I am from Texas. So I just moved to Los Angeles, California around 3 months ago. And let me tell you guys, when I say comparison is something that is so top of mind, it is, because upon moving to LA, I found myself, especially that initial first month, really struggling with comparison. And the reason being is you guys, whether you live in LA, you live in California, or you don't, everyone kind of has this stereotype of what LA is like. And for the most part, I will say not all of them are true, but there's a sense of truth to some of it, in the sense that it is a very self-centered, focused city. There is a lot of fame, there is a lot of wealth. And I think, at least for me personally, coming from Texas, though I have seen, successes, and I've seen wealth, and I've seen XYZ things, I think coming to LA, it made me encounter a success, a wealth, a beauty, a kind of self-focused culture that I personally had never, ever experienced or encountered before. And I think when people ask me what was the greatest shock of moving from Texas to California, more so specifically to LA, it was the realization that I've never been exposed to some of the things I've been exposed to here. Like I said, I've never seen people so young, my age or younger, with such successful businesses. I've never seen people drive the quantity of nice cars. I've never seen such a, dream or idolizing having nice things or nice clothes. I've never seen it to this capacity. And I've also never witnessed people, not that it's necessarily always a bad thing, but just be more self-focused. And that's not to say LA is not amazing. It is, but that was just what I noticed initially. So all that's to say, when I first moved to LA, which I'm still pretty new, I really started to struggle, because it made me look at my life and immediately feel the greatest sense of defeat I think I've felt in a very long time when it comes to my life, who I am, how I look like, how successful I am at 26 years old. And it just really made me doubt myself. And I just realized when I was starting to be in the face of so much self-doubt and really begin to struggle in this way, similar to what Marissa said, it ultimately started to show me the areas that I was idolizing. It was ultimately starting to show me areas of my life that I'm not completely confident in, because I am looking around the room and trying to find worth in comparison to someone else, versus believing and trusting in the worth that is innately mine, exactly where I am, exactly where my life has led me to this point. Because if you would have even rewinded time and told Brie at the beginning of last year that by the end of the year I would have moved to Los Angeles, I would have been blown away, blown away. And it's funny how when we get to the other side of a blessing or an accomplishment or something really big in our lives, the first thing we do is just look for something else to compare ourselves to. We look for something else to make us feel like what we just did wasn't good enough. I could compare my move to Los Angeles as not being good enough compared to someone's $1 million successful business. But when I rewind time and just sit with the fact that moving to LA was a really big deal for me, and that's something to be really proud of, it allows me to just rejoice in my story and in my life. So all that's to say, to answer your initial question, yes, moving to LA really, really made me encounter a lot of comparison, showed me a lot of lack in my heart, showed me where I'm seeking worth and validation from things that are not just within here, but all around me. So with that said, kind of transitioning from my move to LA, I think a huge part of LA and a huge part of just our world and our culture and our society nowadays is social media, which I love social media. I think social media is so fun, but I know that social media can really create a unhealthy standard of what we expect for our lives, what we expect for ourselves. And I think we are constantly living in a society in which we are giving access or given access to really be able to compare our behind the scenes to people's highlight reels. And I think we're consuming so much nowadays that it's inevitable for us to look at people's lives and just feel defeated when all we're seeing is like all the really good things of their lives, but we're also not seeing the behind the scenes of their lives. So with all that said, and with the topic of social media and all of that sort of stuff, I would love to know, Marissa, for you, how do you like really remain grounded with social media, and especially with the topic of comparison? Like, how do you just navigate all of it?
I think it's such a challenge, like you were saying, because honestly, we're seeing so much without even getting permission, in a way where if I step onto an app or just open up my phone onto Instagram or whatever it might be, I am instantly being told by everybody I follow what their Friday night looked like, what their Saturday morning routine is. And I didn't ask for that. Like, you're just constantly being shown these things that I have no choice but to kind of just naturally compare, just to understand, like, okay, my life looks different, whether it's better, for worse. I think it just is so overwhelming for us. And so I think you really kind of need to take that authority back, specifically with social media, and choose to have control of what the information is that you're being fed. So for me, I personally love the mute button. I actually have a rule, and I don't share this with a lot of people because I don't want them to be offended by it. Because again, I have amazing friends, but I have everybody that I personally know. So anybody that I text or hang out with is muted on my Instagram. And the reason being for that is just, I want to know about their life, but I want to hear about it over coffee or over lunch or over these authentic moments that feel very genuine. That's the first time I want to experience what my friends are up to. And so I've muted my friends. And for me, that's a boundary that works really well. I don't know if that's for everybody. But because of that, I'm really able to curate people that I intentionally find that I don't really compare myself to. So a lot of times it's people that are in a different stage of life, or that are super creative, or they're just so different than me that I don't fall victim into that. So that's something specific that's kind of helped me with comparison and something I've found. But honestly, just protecting your mind, noticing that I think social media is a trigger for pretty much all of us when it comes to comparison. So sometimes that's just a season of, okay, I'm just going to delete the app for, a couple weeks. But ultimately, I understand that that's not sustainable. At least for me, I know that even with like work, sometimes we have to use social media and things like that. So honestly, don't be afraid to set boundaries for yourself. I think that's such a beautiful thing that we're able to do, and just to consume content in a way that's very mindful, and just being as intentional as we can, noticing what those triggers are. I've even found, as I've been kind of reflecting on this, like, I've been convicted in my own life where I've began to question, is what I'm sharing causing people to compare themselves? Like, am I sharing this with a genuine heart where my goal is to encourage them? Or is this highlight of my life necessary to share because could it lead other people to feel like maybe they should be there? So I think it kind of goes both ways. Like, I'm setting those boundaries for people in my own life, but I'm also setting them for myself and trying to be really mindful that our lives look so different for a reason. I think that's beautiful, but just trying to be as intentional as I can with what I'm sharing, what I'm consuming, how often I'm using it, making sure that I'm tracking my screen time, analyzing how mentally it's affecting me. I think we just have to be so attuned. Don't feel guilty about setting super strict boundaries and finding what kind of works for you. So I'd be curious, what does that kind of look for you, your relationship with social media? Obviously, it's a big part of your job. Yeah. So you don't really have the same luxuries I might have, where you can just delete the app for 2 months and say goodbye to the temptation altogether.
Yeah. So for you guys who may not already know, I am a social media manager, and that is something that has been my career since I graduated. So there's been times where I wanted to delete social media and just kind of refrain from being able to have access to so many people's lives, like you said, Marissa. But just with the nature of what I do, it is truly not possible. And as much as I try to have boundaries and limits on my time on social media, I think just with the nature of what I do, like it's almost impossible. But I think for me, I do feel very fortunate, and it's something I've really, really worked on. I do believe I have such a healthy view and relationship with social media. And I really believe the reason why is because I am very active in protecting avenues that could lead me to comparison. And what I mean by that is I'm just very mindful of who I follow, why I follow them. I mean, as everybody has at some point in time, I really used to battle with comparison on social media. I would follow girls who there's like literally no way I could possibly ever look like, whether they're like 5 inches taller than me or whatever it may be. It's like I would just find myself following people for no reason, like just to simply look at them and compare myself to them. And when I realized there was a handful of people I was following that were not adding value to my life, that were just literally avenues for me to feel defeated, I just pressed the unfollow button. I stopped looking at those accounts. I personally love to follow people who add so much value to my life and add a richness to my life and add inspiration to my life. And those are the only people that I try to set my sights on when I open up Instagram or TikTok or whatever it may be. I want there to be value added into my life versus value taken away. But even with that said, you can have the best boundaries in the world. You can, try to be really mindful of your screen time, but that still doesn't mean that we're not going to have access to unlimited amounts of people, information, beauty, all that sort of stuff. And so that's where I just really encourage that we need to all, instead of blaming just social media, we need to look inward and start defining and redefining our metric of success. And so, for example, the world is always giving us a measuring stick. They're telling us that followers, likes, views, our body, our beauty, our career, our relationship status, these are all worldly metrics of success. These are all things that we are told that if we have more of, we are deemed of having more status. We are viewed as having more worthiness. We are more noteworthy when we walk into a room. But I think that is what is the detriment of all of us, because when we are constantly measuring ourselves according to these worldly standards, we are going to constantly feel like we are not enough. And so something that I've personally done in my own life that ties into social media, but also my life outside of social media, is redefining what success means to me. And that is on every single level. That is physically, that is spiritually, that is emotionally, and that is just in my life. Not according to what anyone has told me my measure of success is, not according to what the world or social media is telling me, because social media is telling me that I'm more successful if more people follow me. But what if I told myself that my measure of success on social media, for example, is simply by sharing the joy of my day-to-day life, by simply inspiring someone through the words I have to say? If that is my measure of success, then I simply cannot fail. It's only when I look to all these other metrics that I find myself defeated, feeling unworthy, feeling not enough. And so with all that's to say, whether, like I said, it is social media or your body or your life or your career, whatever it is, we need to redefine our metric of success and remind ourselves that that success is not going to be the same as other people's success. For example, someone may be a millionaire by the time they're 25. That might have been their metric of success, but that doesn't mean that just because you're not there at 25 years old, that you are not successful. You might be successful in ways that they are not. And I think of it this way, like some people may have the dream job, but you might also have the dream friendships. Some people might have the $1 million in the bank, but maybe your riches are in the joy that you carry in the day to day. Some people may be married, while some people may be single, such as myself, and I have more time to dedicate to my day to day or myself or travel or whatever I want it to be. And so reminding yourself that not everybody has it all, even though it may feel that way. So with all of that said, Marissa, I would love to ask you, what does success look like for you in your day-to-day life? And would love for you to share that.
Yeah, I feel like that's such a good question. And I was actually reflecting on this when I was making New Year's resolutions for this year and thinking about kind of my previous year. And I'm always kind of writing down goals. And just kind of trying to make sure that I'm making progress. And something I really pushed for in this upcoming year was I didn't necessarily want to set these goals that were so tangible, where it's, for example, like owning a home or having this thing or getting to this salary or whatever it might be. I really wanted to focus on internal growth and just making sure that I'm acknowledging and also just always pushing to grow on the inside, because I feel like that is where God works most effectively. And especially when you're in your 20s, I feel like that is where what God is really up to. He's building your character. And so for me, that has become my metric of success. Where am I at with my faith? How is God working in me? Where is my character? How are my relationships? How are these things that are actually eternal? And just focusing on the things that can't fade. Because I think a lot of times what we're comparing ourselves to, whether it's beauty or things that people might actually have, I'm like, that could go away in an instance. And we've seen that happen time and time again with people. So I want to make sure that I'm focusing on things that I can take with me to eternity and things that I truly am proud of. There's this quote I always think of in my mind when I'm just making decisions, but it's basically this idea of do not settle for good when there's greatness. And in my mind, that distinguishing factor of good to great is what's eternal, and it's what God declares. That's truth and identity and self-worth and these intangible things that exist in your soul. Yeah. Whereas there's so much goodness that the world might say, these things that aren't inherently bad, because a lot of times I don't think they're bad. Like, I don't think it's bad to desire wanting a good career, things like that. But I never want that to overshadow the greatness. And I always want to be invited into that, what God is doing within my soul, what he's doing in relationships, how I can actually bless and love others better. That to me is my metric. And it's great because it's just between me and him. So I don't get to look to anybody else. And to be honest, I don't know anybody else well enough to truly know what's going on in their soul. So how could I ever compare my relationship with God to somebody else's and where they're at? So that's something I've just been kind of trying to remind myself of. And honestly, just tracking that has been affirming. I know in this next year, just seeing that, okay, wow, I've made so much progress within myself. And I'm so proud of what I've accomplished in a month's time, even though I have nothing tangible to show for it.
That's so good.
So I think it will also kind of give you that encouragement that you are making so much progress every single day, and that should be celebrated.
That's so good. And I love what you said of like focusing on our metrics of success on things that can't be taken away. Because like what you mentioned, all these things that we find ourselves tending to compare ourselves to, whether it's our bodies to someone else, our career to someone else, our wealth to someone else, like whatever it is, you name it, I would say 10 out of 10 times those things can be taken away from someone, Those are things that can change. Those are things that they can lose. Those are things that won't last them forever. And if they were all taken away, who would that person then be to you? Would they still be someone you would want to compare to? And I think that kind of ties into focusing on your unique value, your strengths, your purpose, your mission here on earth that has nothing to do with what you can accomplish. And I think for me, when I walk into a room, whether it's like people who are way more successful than me or way more beautiful than me or XYZ worldly metric, the thing that makes me walk into a room confidently and makes me walk into a room knowing I'm adding value has nothing to do with how I look. It has nothing to do with my resume. It has nothing to do with what I've accomplished in this life so far, but it has everything to do with my heart and my soul and my spirit. It has everything to do with believing and trusting that God has created something so unique in me, a personality so unique, a voice so unique, a presence so unique, a love so unique, that is the greatest gift I get to give a room I walk into. That is the greatest gift I give to the barista I talk to at a coffee shop or a new friend that I'm meeting is my specific design, the way God has created my heart. That is something that nobody can take away from me. And so I find in moments when I'm feeling the weight of comparison because I'm not feeling, like I said, pretty enough, successful enough, whatever enough, fill in your own blank, whatever you're struggling with, is reminding myself and rerouting myself and recognizing, God, you created me in such a unique, beautiful way. How can I become so fixated and focused on that when I walk into a room, I know and believe that that is actually my greatest value? And same for Marissa. She walks into a room and she's displaying a portion of God's heart that absolutely nobody else in the room could ever display. You are displaying a warmth, a touch, a presence that nobody could ever compare to. And when we are so fixated and focused on what we can uniquely bring into a room that has nothing to do with the things of this world that can be taken away, that is where we find so much confidence. I think comparison causes us to resent other people versus celebrate other people. And the more we can really press into our unique purpose and identify, wow, like I'm really incredible at this, or I'm really loving in this way, I'm really joyful in this way, I'm really optimistic in this way. The more that we walk into a room and put that at the forefront of our quote unquote resume, I feel like the more confidence we feel, the less resentment and comparison we feel in comparison to others. And the more that we can look at others' successes and really begin to celebrate them of like, wow, it's so beautiful that this person has X, Y, and Z, even if it's something you want, but it's no longer something you feel defeated by because instead you get to trust that God has you exactly where you're meant to be. You get to rest in the fact that you are created with a heart exactly like you were meant to have. And you get to just walk in that peace that your life is for the Lord and He made no mistake in making you. And so with all of that said, I would just love for us to kind of, continue sharing a little bit more about the topic of comparison, but ultimately to just speak on where does our ultimate peace comes from? Because I think those are words that we've been kind of mentioning throughout this episode of, peace and mentioning God and mentioning identity. And we just want to make this like so available for anyone out there, whether you believe in God or you don't, like this is so for you, but we want to share from our perspectives and from our lens of where our peace comes from when we are really fighting and struggling with the battle of comparison. So Marissa, I do want to ask you, where does your peace and freedom come from with comparison?
Yeah, I love what you were touching on, just celebrating other people's uniqueness. I found that actually for me, when I'm struggling with comparison the most, the one thing that's helped so much, apart from just praying through it and all of that, is just celebrating people and calling them out in the areas I see that are so beautiful and unique in them. That to me, when you sincerely do that, and again, it might be a little tricky at first because maybe you have to work through some of those areas of insecurity, but if you can push past that and reach out to your friends, reach out to that stranger you're comparing yourself to and affirm them in that, you will actually experience so much freedom because there is nothing better than feeling like you can encourage people, you can make them smile, and it will actually reveal some of what your gifts are. And it might even spark people to do the same to you, and you can be affirmed in those truths. But there is a verse that I had in mind. This is in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 14 through 18. And it just reminded me a lot of what you were touching on, Brie, but it says, yes, the body has many different parts, not just one part. If the foot says, I am not a part of the body because I am not a hand, that does not make it any less a part of the body. And if the ear says, I am not a part of the body because I am not an eye, would that make it any less part of the body? If the whole body were an eye, how would you hear? Or if the whole body were an ear, how would you smell anything? But our bodies have many parts, and God has put each part just where He wants it. I love that last part where it says, God has put each part just where He wants it. So that is such a reminder. When I think of peace, that is what gives me so much peace. My stage of life, the way I look, how God made me, it is intentional and it is perfect and it is in the image of Him. And it is something where I get to add value to other people. There's nothing I need to do. And I should not compare myself because I actually would probably be overlooking all of the areas that God has designed so intentionally for me. And that's kind of to touch back on what we were saying about when you celebrate people's uniqueness, you begin to understand that, okay, this is a great thing that they're different than me. Like, it's actually amazing that we are in different stages of life and that my life doesn't just look like theirs, because you're a unique person and only God knows what you need in that season. And so I think just honestly finding freedom in that, when I just let go, and I've seen it time and time again, I look back and I would not want to change anything I went through, any of the things that I've compared myself to. I'm so thankful for all of that.
Yeah.
So I just kind of need to live in that mindset and trust that I'm a part of this body. I'm going to contribute what I have to offer, but I get to walk in freedom because God made me exactly how I'm supposed to be. And I'm truly doing myself a disservice by comparing myself to other people, because I start looking through the lens of the world rather than the lens of eternity and how God sees you. So going off of that, how are you kind of able to surrender to some of those struggles of comparison and find that peace for yourself?
Yeah, I think, this whole conversation and what we are trained and taught to do is to view our self-worth through the lens of others. We are always told that our self-worth comes in accordance to who we are in comparison to someone else. But to what Marissa said, that is where I want to challenge myself and challenge you who is listening, anyone out there, to not measure your worth in comparison to others, but measure your worth according to God. Like we shared, when I am so fixated and so focused on, wow, God, like, I want to celebrate that you made my heart so unique. I want to celebrate the way that my words are so unique to Bree. My voice is my voice. My life is my life. My family is my family. My broken path is my own. Nobody can take my story from me. Nobody can take where I'm going away from me. And when I rest in that, and also I rest in the fact that other people's paths were their paths, it allows me and moves me to a place of such peace and such confidence and such faith that I can just sit back and relax and be like, God, at the end of the day, I believe my life is in your hands. And I think sometimes the struggling and the grappling with life, well, it comes from the disbelief that life is, or it comes from the belief that life is actually in your hands, and the disbelief that there is a God who loves you, who he is authoring and perfecting your life. And so I know for me, like, because our faith is so important to us, I can rest in the fact that God is in control of my life and he's made no mistake in my life. And going back even to the celebration versus comparison, the more that, to what Marissa said, the more that I can actually call out and encourage other people in the beautiful gifts they're good at, whether it's the way they love someone, or whether it's the way they're running that business, or the way that they're moving their bodies, or whatever it is, the more that I call out the beauty in others, the more that I feel like God shows me the beauty within myself. And when I am able to have such a beautiful, balanced relationship with really just going out of my way to encourage the people around me, I think in return, it only encourages me and really kind of prevents me from comparing myself to the person that I was speaking to. Because when you were encouraging someone, you literally can't feel lesser than, because you're just too busy edifying, celebrating, and just rejoicing in who they are. And actually, something that just came to mind is, I think about it when you walk into a museum and you see all the artwork, and I just imagine when you walk into a museum, let's say an iconic museum in Europe or something. Imagine if every single artist from the beginning of time stood right next to their piece of artwork. You would never dare look at the painter or the artist or whatever in the eye and tell them your art sucks. You just would not do that. And I think about it so often when we look in the mirror and we are like comparing our lives and we're like, this sucks. Like, this is not good enough. You didn't like do this right. We're essentially looking at God and telling him, God, you really messed up when you made me. And I don't know why, like when I think about that, that just sounds so silly because it's like, just as I would never do that to an artist in front of their painting, why am I on the daily telling God, you didn't make me pretty enough. You didn't make me wealthy enough. You didn't make me this enough. Why would I tell the creator of me that he didn't do a good enough job? And so that is like a metaphor that I like to keep in my mind when I'm just feeling the weight of comparison and just really returning back to the fact that God made no mistake. But yeah, so that is comparison, baby. And there's so many more avenues in which we can talk about this, and there can definitely be more conversations that we can add into this, and even the conversation of confidence when it comes to comparison. But I just pray ultimately that this was encouraging to you, and if nothing else, that you are so reminded in this immediate moment that you are not alone, and that we are two girls in our 20s who are navigating comparison, and by no means have we overcome it, and we are never going to struggle with it ever again. Like, I guarantee I'll probably struggle with it this week. But like we've shared, like this is such a safe space for those struggles to be shared. This is a safe space and a encouraged space for this to just be a candid conversation between us as friends. So we just pray that this was encouraging, that this uplifted you, that you feel lighter after listening to it. And yeah, is there anything else you want to add to this conversation, Marissa?
I don't think so. I love what you were saying about the masterpiece. And yeah, honestly, for me, it's just, I just hope that people not only don't fall victim to comparison, but they're able to celebrate who they are and their uniqueness. I just always think of even friendships, or I remember even a conversation we had where I was encouraging you when you had moved here and you were kind of struggling with comparison. And I was like, to me, from the outside, when I'm seeing somebody compare themselves, like, I just want people to see themselves through the lens of somebody who loves them so deeply. And obviously that's God, but I've been reminded of that when even I think of like my relationship with my husband, and he's called me out on times I've been comparing myself, and he hears those inner thoughts in the way we talk to ourselves sometimes. It just is truly heartbreaking. And think of the person you love so dearly. Think of when you were a child, or a child you might know. You would never talk to them in the way we talk to ourselves. So I really just hope people are so gentle with themselves and just speak to them like the person they love the most. I think that's so important, and that we continue to do that to others. I just hope this gives you a sense of freedom and encouragement to care for yourself, love yourself well, because you were made by such a loving God who makes no mistakes.
Yeah, that's so good. So to end all of this on a little bit of a lighter note, because we know the topic can be a lot, especially if you are listening and you are so in the thick of the pains of comparison, we just want to end on more questions to kind of help you guys get to know us as we're just kind of starting this thing. I'm going to hop into it, and we're just going to alternate between asking each other some questions. So I will start. So Marissa, what is one thing you are grateful for recently?
This might sound like a silly answer, but seasons. And I say that literally where like truly the change of seasons. We've moved just a little bit outside of Los Angeles to a place where we actually have more seasonal weather. And growing up in California, I never really understood the importance of that. But it's been so cool to see to kind of have those like distinguishers where not only is it's these physical changes in the weather, but it's also kind of marked changes that I'm feeling physically and emotionally. So I'm just grateful for seasonality, where it's been great that the weather's getting warmer, but also that I feel like I'm entering a new season in my life. And it's been so cool because there's such a connection between God and nature, and living in a place with more distinct seasons. I'm like, I need to celebrate this and honor that I can see his work not only in me internally, but also externally in the way that harmony is just kind of brought about. And I'm noticing that in my own life. So yeah, I feel like seasons are a beautiful thing and something that I've never really celebrated up until recently. So I really want to highlight that that is something to be so grateful for.
I love that. That's such a sweet one.
Okay, now Brie, what is one part of your daily routine that you can't live without?
So that is so easy for me. That's just my morning routine. And my morning routine, I mean, the first thing I do when I wake up, I'm trying to prioritize waking up even earlier, but the first thing I do is wake up, journal, pray, read my Bible, meditate. Like, I just need that time to myself to really connect with God, connect with myself, and just really start my day off on the best foot that I possibly can, because your morning really is the framework of your entire day, of the way you feel that day. So I always have to start my morning off with those things. And then also I like to work out in the morning. So I feel like my morning is just like my own personal like self-care every single day. So morning routine, mornings are sacred. They are my me and Jesus time. They are my me and moving my body time. It's my favorite thing.
I'm trying to get a more distinct morning routine. I'm still not a morning person, but I love the stillness of mornings.
Yes.
I love just the peace I feel. So I'm like, I am absolutely headed in that direction.
Yes.
And hopefully I'll get there shortly.
My goal, you guys, and y'all can hold me accountable. So right now I wake up at 6 a.m. I want, as this podcast progresses, y'all hold me accountable. I want to wake up at 5:30 a.m. because I want to be so on top of it with my morning routine, but maybe that's crazy.
I am not going to tell you what time I wake up at because I will be judged.
That's okay. But you guys can hold me accountable. Y'all like call me out if I'm not doing it. I don't know how you would know that, but you can call me out. Okay, next question. Marissa, what would you encourage your younger self when it comes to comparison?
I feel like so much of what we were saying, but I feel like if I could go back, I would honestly just affirm all of the things that I now know are my strengths that it took me time to realize. But a lot of the things I disliked about myself, I've learned that, oh no, that's actually like, that is such an intentional design that God had for me. And it causes me to, number one, be dependent on him. So that's amazing. Like, I wouldn't want to do this alone, but also that's actually what people are drawn to. That's what makes me unique. So I would say that to anybody, celebrate your uniqueness, because that's what people like. If you actually ask your friends what they see in you, it's probably going to be a lot of things that you compare yourself in, because that's the beauty of what makes you a unique person and why they chose you and want to be around you specifically. So that would be my advice.
That's a good one. That's so good.
Okay, last and final, Priya. I know we talked about a lot, but what do you hope people take away from this episode?
So many things. But I think right now, like in this immediate moment, I'm such a feeler, you guys, and y'all will just like grow to understand that about me the more that you get to know me. But I just like feel in this immediate moment that there is someone out there who is currently listening, is gonna listen to this episode, and they are just gonna feel the deep sorrow and the deep pain of how much they've been struggling with comparison. And if nothing else, reminding yourself you are so not alone. Like, you are not alone, and we see you and we love you and we want to be those friends for you. And I just want to so encourage and reiterate that, like, you were so beautifully and wonderfully made. There is no mistake in you, and there is a part of God's heart that is so uniquely within you that nobody else carries. So please take a moment to sit back and recognize that. Rest in the fact that you are beautiful by design, and nothing of this world can take that from you. Nothing of this world can add value to who you currently already are. You are enough as you are, and that is a promise not by me, not by Brie, but by God. So love you so much, whoever is listening. But to wrap up this episode, we encourage you guys to follow us along on Instagram at With Love Always Podcast. We will be posting new episodes every single Wednesday, so stay tuned for all the goodness to come. And send in prayer requests.
Yes, please.
We would love that. That's just something that just came to mind, but especially on Instagram, we would love for you guys to feel the freedom, whether it's through a comment or through a DM, to please send us prayer requests, because we want to make ourselves as available as possible to just like love you in that way, because we do see you guys as friends. So open invitation, baby. Anyways, we love you guys so much. With love always, Bree
and Marissa.
Bye, you guys.
Bye. Thank you so much for listening. We pray this episode was encouraging and life-giving. If you found it valuable, please share it with a friend, leave a review, and subscribe.
And be sure to follow us along over on Instagram at With Love Always Podcast. Signing off with all of our love always, Bree
and Marissa.